The day the judge said, "Divorce granted," I didn't cry. I simply stood there, staring at the woman I had loved for 12 years, hoping she would turn around one last time. She never did. She picked up her handbag, signed the final document, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. At that moment, I realized something terrifying. Sometimes the loudest heartbreak is the one that happens in complete silence. My name is Ryan Carter. For most of my life, I believed love was something you protected with loyalty, patience, and sacrifice. I believed that if you worked hard enough, stayed faithful enough, and loved deeply enough, your marriage could survive anything. I was wrong. Because love doesn't always end with screaming arguments or dramatic betrayals. Sometimes it disappears one ordinary day at a time. One unanswered question. One cancelled dinner. One forgotten anniversary. One conversation that never happens. Until two people wake up one morning and realize they're living beside a stranger. 12 years earlier. Olivia wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend. We met inside a small coffee shop in downtown Seattle during a cold October afternoon. Rain hammered against the windows while everyone rushed inside to escape the storm. I was an exhausted architecture student trying to finish a project before midnight. She was sitting alone near the window, reading a novel while quietly sipping hot chocolate. Then the lights went out. The entire cafe became dark. People groaned. Some complained. Others immediately reached for their phones. Olivia simply laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was warm. Honest. The kind of laugh that made the whole room feel lighter. Without realizing it. I smiled too. She noticed. So? She asked. Do power outages usually make people smile? I laughed. No. You do. She blushed. I'll take that as a compliment. The owner lit several candles around the cafe. Soft golden light replaced the fluorescent bulbs. Outside, the rain refused to stop. Inside, time seemed to slow down. She invited me to sit with her because, according to her, no one should work on blueprints during candlelight. I told her architects don't get days off. She smiled. Maybe life is telling you to take one. I closed my laptop. For the next 4 hours, we talked about everything. Books. Travel. Childhood memories. Music. Dreams. Fear. Family. The future. When the cafe finally closed, neither of us wanted to leave. Standing beneath the awning while rain continued falling around us, she looked at the empty streets and smiled. Maybe this blackout happened for a reason. I looked at her. I was thinking the exact same thing. She laughed again. That laugh became my favorite sound in the world. 3 months later, we were inseparable. 1 year later, I proposed beside the Seattle waterfront at sunset. She cried before I even finished asking the question. Yes, she whispered. Before you change your mind. I laughed. I've already made the best decision of my life. Our wedding wasn't extravagant. There were no luxury decorations. No celebrity guests. No expensive venue. Just our families. Our closest friends. And 2 people who believed nothing could ever separate them. For a long time. We were right. Years passed beautifully. We bought our first apartment. We adopted a golden retriever named Cooper. Every Sunday morning we walked along Alki Beach with coffee in our hands. Sometimes we spoke for hours. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. We simply enjoyed being together. Friends constantly told us we were relationship goals. The perfect couple. The kind of marriage everyone wished they had. Looking back now, I understand something heartbreaking. The strongest looking relationships often break where no one can see. Not with explosions. But with silence. Not because people stop loving each other overnight. But because they slowly stop making each other feel seen. And neither of us noticed it happening. Until it was already too late. Every marriage has invisible cracks. The problem is, you rarely notice them until the whole foundation begins to collapse. For us, it started with success. After graduation, I joined one of Seattle's fastest-growing architectural firms. The projects became bigger. The deadlines became tighter. The paychecks became larger. I convinced myself I was doing it for us. Every late night at the office. Every canceled vacation. Every missed anniversary dinner. I called it sacrifice. Olivia called it absence. At first, she understood. She would leave dinner in the microwave with a handwritten note. Asterisk, heat this before midnight, and don't forget I love you. Asterisk. I always smiled when I read those little notes. But most nights, the food became cold before I even walked through the front door. Eventually, the notes disappeared. One evening, I came home after another 14-hour workday. The apartment was unusually quiet. Cooper greeted me at the door, wagging his tail. Olivia didn't. She was sitting alone on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the Seattle skyline. I walked over and kissed her forehead. "I'm sorry I'm late." She nodded without looking at me. "You always are." I tried to joke. "Big project." She smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. I know. That answer should have worried me. Instead, I went back inside and opened my laptop. Looking back, that might have been the moment we truly started losing each other. Weeks turned into months. We still lived in the same apartment. We still slept in the same bed. We still said, "Good morning." We still said, "Good night." But somewhere between those words, we stopped talking. One Saturday morning, Olivia asked, "Would you like to go hiking tomorrow?" Without looking up from my phone, I answered, "I can't." She waited. "Why?" "I have to finish some work. It'll only take a few hours." "I know. So come afterward." "I can't promise." She quietly nodded. "Okay." The next day, she went alone. When she returned, she looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. She had learned something that day. She could enjoy life without me. Months later, she started taking photography classes. At first, I was excited. "I'm glad you found a hobby." She smiled politely. "It isn't a hobby. It's something that makes me feel alive." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. While I designed buildings, she captured moments. Sunsets. Rain. Street musicians. Children laughing in parks. Old couples holding hands. She started winning local photography competitions. Her pictures appeared in magazines. People recognized her work. I was proud. But I wasn't present. One evening, she placed one of her framed photographs on the dining table. "Look at this." Without lifting my eyes from my laptop, I replied, "It looks beautiful." She didn't move. "You didn't even look." I finally glanced at it. "It really is beautiful." She sighed. "Ryan. You looked at your emails longer than you looked at something I spent 6 months creating." The room became silent. "I didn't mean." "I know." She interrupted gently. "That's the problem. You never mean to hurt me. But somehow, you always do." Her words stayed in my mind for days. Still, I changed nothing. I kept believing that once this project ended, everything would return to normal. Then another project arrived. Then another. Life became an endless cycle of deadlines. One rainy Friday evening, Olivia surprised me by visiting my office. She carried 2 cups of coffee. I thought we could have dinner together. I looked around the conference room. Blueprints covered every table. My entire team was still working. I'm sorry. I can't leave. Her smile faded. You said that last Friday. I know. And the Friday before. I know. And on my birthday. I lowered my eyes. She placed 1 coffee beside my laptop. The other remained untouched in her hand. I miss you. Those 3 words hit harder than any argument ever could. I stood up. I'll finish in an hour. She shook her head. No. You already made your choice. She walked away. I watched her disappear into the elevator. Something inside me whispered. Go after her. I didn't. I told myself. Tomorrow. But tomorrow has destroyed more relationships than yesterday ever did. A few weeks later. I came home earlier than usual. The apartment looked unusually organized. Every bookshelf had been cleaned. The kitchen was spotless. Fresh flowers stood on the dining table. For one brief moment, I smiled. Maybe this was our fresh start. Then I noticed the suitcase standing beside the front door. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from sleepless nights. It comes from trying to save something that only one person is fighting for. I've been packing all afternoon, she said quietly. I stared at the suitcase. What is this? She took a slow breath. I'm leaving. The words didn't make sense. Leaving? For the first few seconds, my mind refused to accept what my ears had heard. I laughed nervously. Come on, stop joking. She didn't smile. I've already signed the lease. My heart dropped. Lease? For an apartment downtown. I felt the room spinning. You rented another apartment? She nodded. I moved some of my things yesterday. Yesterday. She had packed part of her life while I was sitting inside another meeting, discussing building designs I can't even remember today. When were you going to tell me? I've been trying to tell you for almost 2 years. Silence filled the apartment. Cooper walked between us, sensing something neither of us wanted to admit. I finally whispered. We can fix this. Olivia looked down at the floor. I begged you to fix it. I asked you to go on dates again. I asked you to travel. I asked you to see a counselor. I asked you to put your phone away during dinner. I asked you to look at me when I spoke. Her voice never became louder. That somehow hurt even more. I wasn't asking for miracles, Ryan. I was asking for you. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because every sentence she spoke was true. I worked hard for us. She gently shook her head. No. You worked hard for a future we never got to live. Another silence. This one felt endless. I still love you. I finally said. She closed her eyes. I know. But love isn't the problem anymore. Being loved by someone who's never emotionally here feels exactly like being alone. Those words shattered something inside me. For the first time in years, I truly saw her. The tired eyes. The forced smile. The loneliness she had been carrying while standing only a few feet away from me every single day. How had I missed it? How had I become a stranger to the person I promised forever? She picked up the suitcase. I instinctively reached for it. Please. Don't go. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I waited for this moment for 2 years. I kept hoping you'd stop me before I reached this day. I kept believing tomorrow would finally be different. She looked directly into my eyes. But tomorrow never came. She walked toward the front door. Every step sounded louder than the last. I followed her. I'll quit my job. She stopped. I'll take a vacation. She remained silent. I'll do therapy. Nothing. I'll change. She turned around one last time. I believe you. Hope rushed through my chest. Then she quietly added. I just don't believe you'll change because you finally understand me. I think you're changing because you're finally losing me. That sentence stayed with me for years. She opened the front door. Cold Seattle rain filled the hallway with the smell of wet pavement. Before stepping outside, she whispered something I'll never forget. I hope one day you become the man I spent 12 years believing you already were. Then she left. The apartment became unbearably quiet. The ticking clock suddenly sounded deafening. Cooper sat beside the door for hours. Waiting. Every time footsteps echoed in the hallway, he'd lift his head. His tail would wag. Then slowly stop again. Just like mine. For the next several weeks, I lived as if my body existed. But my soul had already moved out with Olivia. I stopped cooking. I stopped sleeping. I stopped answering calls from friends. The apartment became a museum of unfinished conversations. Her favorite coffee mug still sat beside the sink. Her sweater still hung behind the bedroom door. One strand of her hair remained caught in her hairbrush. Every object became evidence that someone had once loved me enough to build a life here. And every object reminded me. I had been too busy planning our future to notice our present was disappearing. One rainy evening, nearly a month after she left, an official envelope arrived in the mail. I already knew what it was before opening it. Petition for dissolution of marriage. At the bottom. Her signature looked exactly the same. Only this time. It broke my heart. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning. I stared at the envelope for nearly an hour before opening it. Somehow, I believed that as long as it remained sealed, our marriage still had a chance. Breaking that seal felt like signing the death certificate of the life we had built together. Every page described our relationship as if it were nothing more than a legal transaction. Assets. Property. Accounts. Liabilities. There wasn't a single line about Sunday mornings on Alki Beach. Nothing about the road trips. Nothing about Cooper. Nothing about the promises we whispered to each other before falling asleep. 12 years had been reduced to paperwork. I signed the documents 3 days later. Not because I wanted to. Because I finally understood. You can't force someone to stay after they've already left emotionally. The court hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. 12 years. Ended in less time than a lunch break. The judge spoke calmly. Both attorneys nodded politely. Someone shuffled papers across a wooden desk. Then came the sentence that echoed inside my head for months. Divorce granted. That was it. No dramatic music. No emotional speeches. No second chances. Just silence. Olivia stood up before I did. She looked beautiful. Not because she was happy. But because she finally looked free. For a brief second. I wanted to call her name. I wanted to tell her everything I had failed to say over the last 2 years. I wanted to apologize. To beg. To promise. But I stayed silent. She walked past me. Close enough that I could smell the same lavender perfume she'd worn since our honeymoon. Then she disappeared through the courthouse doors. That was the last time I saw my wife. Or so I thought. The months that followed became the darkest period of my life. I stopped answering phone calls. I ignored text messages. Friends knocked on my apartment door. I pretended I wasn't home. My boss placed me on unpaid leave after noticing I couldn't concentrate. One afternoon I stared at a building blueprint for nearly 4 hours. I couldn't remember what I was looking at. Sleep became impossible. Whenever I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed about Olivia walking away. Every night. The dream ended the same way. I reached for her. She disappeared before I could touch her. I woke up gasping for air. Covered in sweat. Completely alone. The apartment felt enormous now. Too quiet. Too empty. Even Cooper changed. He spent every evening lying beside the front door. Still waiting. Still believing she'd come back. Sometimes I'd catch myself doing the same. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart raced. Maybe it was her. It never was. One afternoon I walked into the bedroom and found one of Olivia's old scarves tucked behind a drawer. Without thinking, I lifted it to my face. It still carried the faint scent of her perfume. That was the first time I truly broke. I collapsed onto the bedroom floor and cried harder than I ever had in my entire life. Not because she had left, but because I finally understood why. 4 weeks afterward, I barely left the apartment. My beard grew longer. Dirty dishes filled the sink. Laundry piled across the bedroom floor. Curtains remained closed. Morning looked exactly like night. Time no longer mattered. One evening my younger sister, Sarah, unlocked my apartment with the spare key I'd forgotten she still had. She stood silently inside the living room, looking around. At the empty bottles. The untouched food. The darkness. Then she walked over and hugged me. I didn't hug her back. She pulled away just enough to look into my eyes. This isn't grief anymore, Ryan. This is drowning. I don't care if you're angry. I don't care if you hate me. But tomorrow, you're coming with me. I shook my head. I don't want to. I know. She answered softly. That's exactly why you have to. The next morning she drove me somewhere without telling me where we were going. We stopped outside a small brick building surrounded by maple trees. A simple sign stood near the entrance. Seattle Wellness and Recovery Center. I looked at her. I'm not crazy. She smiled sadly. No. You're heartbroken. And those aren't the same thing. For several minutes, I refused to get out of the car. Finally, an elderly man walked out of the building carrying a cup of coffee. He smiled at me through the windshield. Not with pity. With understanding. That simple smile somehow gave me enough courage to open the car door. I had no idea that walking into that building would become the first real step toward finding the man I had lost long before my marriage ended. He expected therapy to fix his marriage. Instead, it forced him to face himself. My therapist's name was Dr. Michael Harris. He was in his 60s, with silver hair, kind eyes, and the calm voice of someone who had listened to thousands of broken hearts before mine. During our first session, I barely spoke. For nearly an hour, I stared at the carpet while answering every question with 1 or 2 words. How are you feeling today? Fine. Do you miss her? Yes. What do you miss most? Silence. Dr. Harris didn't interrupt. He simply waited. Eventually, I whispered. I missed the man she believed I could become. He leaned forward slightly. That's an interesting answer. I expected you to say you missed your wife. I do. I replied. But I think I lost myself long before I lost her. For the first time since the divorce. Someone didn't try to make me feel better. He simply nodded. Good. I frowned. Good. He smiled gently. Because healing begins the moment you stop blaming only the other person. Those words stayed with me all week. Every Thursday, I returned to his office. Week after week. We talked. Not just about Olivia. About my childhood. My fears. My obsession with success. The pressure I placed on myself. The impossible standard that convinced me I had to earn love by constantly proving my worth. One afternoon he asked me a question that completely changed my perspective. When was the last time you were genuinely happy? I immediately answered. My wedding day. He smiled. No. I asked when. Not where. Not with whom. When. I thought for several minutes. Finally. I couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way. Achievement had replaced happiness. Promotion replaced peace. Deadlines replaced conversations. Success replaced life itself. That realization hurt more than the divorce. Because it meant Olivia hadn't destroyed my happiness. I had abandoned it years earlier. Dr. Harris gave me one assignment before our next session. Every morning. Walk for 30 minutes. No phone. No music. No destination. Just walk. I almost laughed. You think walking will fix my life? No. He replied calmly. But standing still definitely won't. The following morning. I forced myself outside. Seattle greeted me with cold air and gray skies. The city looked exactly the same. Only I had changed. I walked through quiet neighborhoods. Past coffee shops where couples laughed together. Past parks filled with children chasing one another. Past people who had no idea a broken man was silently searching for himself. For the first week. I hated every step. By the second week. Something unexpected happened. I started noticing things. Cherry blossoms blooming beside old brick buildings. A violinist performing beneath the train station. The smell of fresh bread drifting from a neighborhood bakery. Golden sunlight breaking through clouds after rain. These small moments had always existed. I had simply been too busy to see them. One Saturday morning. My walk took me to a small independent bookstore I'd somehow never noticed before. The sign above the entrance read. Brooks and Pages. Warm yellow lights glowed through the windows. Without thinking. I stepped inside. The smell of old books instantly wrapped around me. Soft jazz music played quietly in the background. Rows of wooden shelves stretched across the room. It felt peaceful. Almost timeless. I wandered through the history section before hearing a voice behind me. If you're looking for something that changes your life, don't start with the bestsellers. I turned around. Standing beside a bookshelf was a woman about my age. She had kind green eyes. A warm smile. And an expression that carried both sadness and strength. She held 3 novels in one arm while dusting a shelf with the other. I'm Emma. She said. I own this little place. I introduced myself. She smiled. You look like someone who came here for more than books. I almost denied it. Instead, I laughed quietly. I think you're right. Emma nodded as though she understood without needing an explanation. She didn't ask about my divorce. She didn't ask why I looked exhausted. She simply handed me a worn paperback. The Midnight Library. This one has helped a lot of people. I looked at the cover. Is it good? She smiled. It finds people exactly when they need it. For reasons I couldn't explain. I bought the book. As I walked toward the door, Emma called after me. Ryan. I turned. Same time next Saturday. I smiled for the first time in months. I think I'd like that. Walking home. The city somehow looked brighter. Not because my pain had disappeared. But because, for the first time since Olivia left, the future no longer felt completely empty. Emma became part of my Saturday mornings without either of us planning it. At first, I told myself I was only visiting the bookstore because it was peaceful. The truth was, it wasn't the books that kept bringing me back. It was the feeling I had whenever I walked through that door. For the first time in years, nobody expected anything from me. Emma never asked why my marriage ended. She never tried to fix me. She simply treated me like a person instead of a broken project. Every Saturday, she recommended a different book. Some were about forgiveness. Some were about courage. Others were simply beautiful stories that reminded people life could still surprise them. One morning she handed me a journal instead of a novel. I don't write, I admitted. She smiled. You don't have to. Just tell the paper what you're too afraid to tell yourself. That night, I opened the journal. The first page stayed blank for almost 20 minutes. Then I wrote a single sentence. I don't know who I am without my marriage. I stared at those words until sunrise. The following week, I filled another page. Then another. Eventually, writing became easier than pretending I was okay. Dr. Harris noticed the difference immediately. You look lighter. I don't feel lighter. I replied. He nodded. Recovery always begins on the inside. The outside simply takes longer to notice. Months slowly passed. I returned to work, but not to the same company. I turned down a promotion that would have required another 70-hour workweek. A younger version of me would have accepted without hesitation. This time, I chose balance. My new office overlooked Elliott Bay. Every evening at 5 o'clock, I closed my laptop and actually went home. At first, it felt wrong. Almost irresponsible. Then I realized something. The buildings I designed would still be there tomorrow. Life wouldn't. One afternoon, Emma invited me to help organize a community book fair. I should warn you, she laughed. It involves carrying hundreds of heavy boxes. I used to carry steel beams across construction sites. I smiled. I think I can handle books. The event took place in a neighborhood park beneath enormous maple trees. Families wandered between colorful tents. Children sat on blankets listening to volunteers read stories aloud. Musicians played soft acoustic music nearby. Watching everyone laugh together reminded me how long it had been since I'd simply enjoyed being alive. While unpacking a box, I noticed Emma helping a little girl choose her very first novel. She knelt beside the child, speaking with the same kindness she'd shown me on my first visit. There was something extraordinary about the way she made people feel seen. Not impressive. Not important. Seen. Later that afternoon, we sat on folding chairs drinking lemonade after everything was finished. She looked at the sunset and quietly said, "You smile differently now." I laughed. I smile. She nodded. When you first walked into my bookstore, you smiled with your mouth. But your eyes looked exhausted. She turned toward me. Now your eyes smile first. I didn't know how to answer. Instead, I asked. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you always helping everyone else? For a moment. She looked toward the horizon. My husband died 8 years ago. The words caught me completely off guard. I didn't know. Most people don't. She smiled softly. We were only married for 3 years. Cancer doesn't negotiate. Silence settled between us. I spent years believing my life had ended with his. She continued. Then one day I realized something. Loving someone deeply doesn't mean your own story has to end when theirs does. I looked at her. So you opened a bookstore? She laughed. He always said books saved lonely people. I figured I'd give lonely people a place to find both. I smiled. I think it worked. She looked at me for a long moment. I think you're proof of that. For the first time since my divorce, I didn't feel like someone who had survived. I felt like someone who had started living again. That night, I returned home and looked around my apartment. It no longer felt like a museum. The curtains were open. Fresh flowers sat beside the window. The sink was empty. The walls no longer echoed with silence. Without realizing it, I had rebuilt more than my routine. I had rebuilt myself. Then, on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, just as I believed the hardest chapter of my life was finally behind me, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. I answered. Hello. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. Ryan. It was Olivia. Ryan. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. 5 years had passed since the courthouse. 5 years since she walked out of my life carrying a single suitcase. 5 years since I convinced myself I'd never hear her voice again. Yet there she was. The same calm tone. The same softness. Only now, it sounded heavier. Hi, she whispered. I know I probably shouldn't have called. I leaned against my office window, staring at the gray Seattle sky. What happened? She let out a slow breath. You always ask that first. I almost laughed. I guess some things never change. No. She replied quietly. Some things do. Silence settled between us. Not the uncomfortable silence we used to have during the last years of our marriage. This one was different. It carried years of unfinished conversations. I heard about your bookstore volunteer work. She finally said. And your architecture project downtown. You seem happy. The word sounded unfamiliar. Happy. No one had described me that way in years. I've been trying. I can tell. Another pause. I was hoping. She hesitated. Maybe we could have coffee. I closed my eyes. 5 years ago, I would have agreed before she finished the sentence. Now, everything inside me felt strangely calm. Why? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Because there are things I should have told you a long time ago. I looked across the city. People hurried below my office building. Cars moved through the rain. Life continued. I don't think it's a good idea. I understand. She answered. I owe you the truth. The truth. Funny how people often wait until it's too late to tell it. After several long seconds, I finally spoke. One coffee. That's all. I'll be there. Her voice almost broke. Thank you. She hung up before I could respond. Saturday arrived colder than usual. The same coffee shop where we first met 20 years earlier still stood on the corner. It looked smaller now. Or maybe I had simply grown older. I walked inside. The smell of fresh coffee instantly pulled me into memories I thought I'd buried forever. She was already there. Sitting beside the same window. Holding a cup with both hands. When she looked up, time stopped. She looked older. Not dramatically. Just, human. A few silver strands rested among her brown hair. Tiny lines framed the corners of her eyes. She smiled nervously. Hi. I nodded. Hi. Neither of us knew whether to hug, shake hands, or simply sit. So we sat. The waitress asked for my order. Black coffee. Just like always. Olivia smiled faintly. You still drink it without sugar. I looked at the cup. Some habits survive. Others don't. She noticed the wedding ring was gone. Of course it was. So was hers. For several minutes. We talked about ordinary things. Weather. Work. Seattle traffic. Anything except the reason we were there. Finally. She reached into her purse. I've carried this for years. She placed a folded envelope on the table. I immediately recognized my handwriting. My heart skipped. No. She slowly nodded. I found it. I stared at the envelope as though it belonged to someone else. This is impossible. It was inside one of my mother's old storage boxes. She looked down. The day you gave me that letter. My younger cousin accidentally picked it up with the graduation decorations. We didn't know. My mother found it after she passed away. Her voice cracked. I read it 5 years after our divorce. My hands began shaking. The envelope remained unopened. Exactly as I'd written it. Exactly as I'd sealed it. Exactly as I'd hoped she would one day read it. Only 32 years too late. Tears filled Olivia's eyes. I spent all those years believing you never loved me enough to fight for us. She swallowed hard. And all those years. You believed I rejected you. Neither of us spoke. The silence said everything. One tiny accident. One lost letter. One misunderstanding. A lifetime of regret. Olivia wiped away a tear. Ryan. I've replayed our marriage in my head 1,000 times. I blamed you. I blamed myself. I blamed fate. She looked directly into my eyes. But the truth is, we stopped talking long before we stopped loving. I looked at the letter lying between us. For years, I believed opening it would heal everything. Now, I wasn't so sure. Because some truths arrive too late to change the past. But sometimes, they're exactly what we need to finally let it go. Olivia pushed the envelope toward me. I've never opened it again since that day. I thought. Maybe you should be the one to read it. For a long moment, I couldn't move. That letter had once represented hope. Now, it represented every year we had lost. Slowly, I picked it up. The paper had turned slightly yellow with age. The edges were worn. My own handwriting looked younger. More hopeful. I carefully unfolded it. Inside were the words written by a 26-year-old man who believed love could conquer anything. Dear Olivia. If you're reading this, then I'm finally brave enough to tell you what I've been too afraid to say out loud. You have never simply been my wife. You have always been my safest place. I know I've made mistakes. I've worked too much. I've missed moments that mattered. But if there's even the smallest part of your heart that still believes in us. Please don't give up. I'll spend the rest of my life becoming the husband you deserve. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Starting today. Because losing you is the only future I'm truly afraid of. Forever yours. Asterisk, Ryan. Asterisk. My vision blurred. The words shook in my hands. For years, I believed she had ignored that letter. Now I knew. She had never even seen it. Olivia quietly cried across the table. I'm sorry. Those 2 words carried 32 years of regret. I should have fought harder. She whispered. I should have told you how lonely I felt instead of expecting you to notice. I looked at her. And I should have listened before silence became normal. Neither of us blamed the other anymore. Age had replaced anger with understanding. Sometimes, love doesn't fail because 2 people stop caring. Sometimes, it fails because they stop talking. We sat together until the coffee grew cold. No accusations. No arguments. Only honesty. The kind of honesty we should have shared decades earlier. Finally, Olivia reached across the table. If life gave us another chance, would you choose us again? I smiled. Not because the answer was easy. Because it was finally honest. I'll always be grateful that I loved you. You shaped the man I became. You taught me what love feels like. And losing you taught me what love requires. She lowered her eyes. But, I continued gently. I'm not the same man you divorced. And you're not the same woman I married. We don't need to go backward. We needed this conversation so we could finally move forward. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Yet, she smiled. For the first time. It wasn't the smile of someone hoping to change the past. It was the smile of someone finally accepting it. She stood up. So, this is goodbye. I slowly shook my head. No. It's thank you. She laughed softly through her tears. You always did know the right words. No. I smiled. I finally learned them. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that afternoon. We walked out of the cafe together. At the corner where our paths separated, we stopped. She stepped forward and hugged me. Not as husband and wife. Not as strangers. But as 2 people who had finally forgiven each other. When she pulled away, she whispered. I hope you're happy. I looked toward the street where Emma's bookstore stood only a few blocks away. I am. And I hope you find your happiness too. She nodded. I think today was the first step. Then, she walked away. This time, I didn't ask her to stay. I simply watched until she disappeared into the crowd. Not because I was losing her again. But because I had finally let her go. That evening, I walked into Brooks and Page's. Emma looked up from a stack of books and smiled. You're late. I know. I replied. I had to finish an old chapter. She studied my face for a moment. You look different. I feel different. I told her everything. The phone call. The coffee. The letter. The goodbye. When I finished, Emma reached across the table and gently held my hand. I'm proud of you. For what? For choosing peace instead of the past. Months later, on a quiet autumn afternoon, I returned to the waterfront where Olivia had once said yes to my proposal. The wind carried fallen leaves across the sidewalk. I smiled. Not because nothing had gone wrong. But because everything that had gone wrong had led me here. People often believe healing means forgetting. It doesn't. Healing means remembering without breaking. Loving without holding on. Forgiving without reopening old wounds. Some people enter your life to stay forever. Others enter to teach you how to become the person you're meant to be. Olivia gave me beautiful memories. Emma gave me a beautiful future. And both taught me the same lesson. Love alone is never enough. Love must be spoken. Protected. Prioritized. Every single day. Because the greatest tragedy isn't losing someone you love. It's realizing too late that they were quietly waiting to be loved the way they deserved. If you're lucky enough to still have someone who waits for you, put your phone down. Look into their eyes. Tell them what they mean to you. Don't wait for tomorrow. Because tomorrow has ended more love stories than yesterday ever will. The end.